This episode is brought to you by VoiceGift. What if your family tree could speak? VoiceGift helps preserve the voices and stories that define your family, so they're never lost to time. Record memories from parents and grandparents and link them to photos, albums, and heirlooms. Inspired by museum audio guides and designed to last, VoiceGift Play is an audio time capsule for generations. Find your voice at www.voice.gift. That's www.voice.gift. And stick around for my interview in this episode with Jeffrey Stern, founder and CEO of VoiceGift. Each website we use for genealogy has its own quirks and best practices, but some strategies are common to a wide swath of search engines and databases: Google, Ancestry.com, Family Search, Find My Past, and MyHeritage, to name a few. Here to share some non-denominational online search tips is Family Tree Magazine's founding editor, David A. Fryxell, author of an article in the January-February issue called Star Search. Welcome back to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me.
So I said that this article came out in the January-February 2026 issue, but you actually wrote on this subject way back in 2016, 10 years ago. What about searching online has changed since then, and what has stayed the same?
Yes, we sort of recycle, I guess, but so much has changed that it was pretty darn new. I think the biggest difference is back then we were really thinking more of the internet, and a lot of the tips were for just sort of general internet searching. But these days it just seems like a lot more of what you're really looking for is in some of those big like databases and sites that you mentioned. So it's probably more important to figure out tricks for searching ancestry and family search and so forth. I think back, 10 years ago, there was more the feeling of, it's a big wide world internet and there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. And we're always discovering new websites. Now, although obviously there are exceptions for sites, for example, and individual state sites, but so much of the data is now concentrated in a relatively small handful of sites, at least in terms of searching and extracting data. So, you really need to be a good ancestry and Find My Past and family search searcher, as opposed to just sort of wandering out there in the internet.
Mm-hmm. Right. That consolidation really is key. That as these companies merge and acquire new websites, that there is a little bit of a homogenization happening, maybe. I'm working on an article right now on French genealogy websites, for example, Genealogists and Philae, both part of those Ancestry and MyHeritage ecosystems. So you start to see, that overlap.
And not that long ago, they were just completely, on their own and independent, and then they get gobbled up. I guess you can still search them in their original universes, but now you find them with the biggies.
Right. Now, one of these search terms that's kind of stood the test of time, these strategies are Boolean terms. Can you talk about what those are? What are the most common ones, and what do they do?
Well, yeah, and obviously this goes back to like the early days of, I guess, logic more than even computers. Terms like, and, or, having, one wasn't inclusive, one's an either or kind of thing. Not. In some sites you can use terms like near. There's enclosing things in parentheses, enclosing them in quote marks, things like that. So they're really basic. If you studied logic in, I don't know, high school, you might come across all these terms. But and the trick, I guess, these days is not all the sites necessarily use those terms as such, but some of them assume that you're using one or the other. Like the and or is the obvious thing. Is that some sites, when you assume that you mean and, it means Smith and Virginia, whereas others assume or Smith or Virginia. So trying to figure that out can be, kind of a challenge.
And that makes a big difference too. Smith
and
Virginia
it takes it out of your hands.
Right. It's a much more narrow field that you're searching as opposed to the or operator there.
Right.
So and or give the search engine a little more context. We want these terms together, or we want them one or the other, sort of and or the other. You can also tell the search engine to not include a certain term. One that comes to mind for me is I have a surname Winter. So if I'm searching a database for winter, I might say winter, not snow, not season. And that would probably be helpful for the Smiths out there and the
And some of those are you can use plus or minus for to mean the same. So often you have a minus sign, meaning I don't want all those winter sites that 10 great winter hobbies or something.
sure, right. Because that can really kind of mess up, especially with these new full text search that Family Search has, where it's searching a broader lexicon, I guess, if you will, of you're sifting through more language. You're going to pick up more of those kind of common nouns
I
that.
think you have to be really smart in any kind of full text search for just that reason, that you could get so many false, positives there, that makes the searching almost useless if you're not really smart about it. And kind of, okay, what am I really looking for? What are the unique terms that will pop out that I can use to find what I'm looking for? And what are terms that are just going to make a mess of it?
Right. And the strategy is especially important with these websites getting bigger and bigger. That's more and more data to sift through in the same size entry point, if that makes sense. That
Yeah, exactly. Well, sometimes, Ancestry is a good example that instead of using just sort of the all over search, if you think, well, what am I looking for? I'm looking for an immigration or passenger list.
Mhm.
So I'll just search the immigration and passenger list search rather than the overall search, which gets me family trees and census and all that sort of. So I think honing, particularly when they've globbed it all together, that honing exactly what you want to search. What is my goal in this particular
Mhm.
search can help a lot.
Right. And that's helpful not just because you're searching a smaller group of records, but the search forms themselves change. Yeah.
If you're searching immigration, for example, you'll get the option of like arrival or departure or something like that. Whereas if you're just doing the overall ancestry search, that usually is not even an option. So, and that might be the most important thing in narrowing it down. Well, I know they left about 1873, so you want to be able to put that in. And if you can't, then you're far behind.
And now, a word from our sponsor. I'm here with Jeffrey Stern. He is the founder and CEO of VoiceGift. Welcome to the podcast, Jeffrey.
Andrew, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to become introduced to the Family Tree audience. I've been in the audio business for 20 years. I've sold maybe 60 million sounds, some people say annoying sounds, to Build-A-Bear Workshop. But through that, I really learned to understand the power of voice and sounds to trigger emotions and memories. And so you can imagine how excited I am to be going to RUTEC in March and to being introduced to the whole memory, legacy, heritage industry.
Yeah, and I think that power of voice is so prevalent in family history. You hear your grandparents' voice, and it immediately sends you back in a way that other uh, sensory experiences maybe don't. And I think that's sort of what's at the core of this new product that you've developed, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me give you a little bit of background. It's called Play, and it looks like, I don't know, a remote control. It's basically modeled after those audio guides that people of my age remember when we went to museums, and usually they were black and tech looking, and they gave you headphones, and you'd walk around the museum, and next to a statue or a big picture, you'd have a little number and you'd get to hear from the curator, and they would basically create the context for your experience. And I said, why shouldn't we have a consumer version of that? But unlike the professional version, we want to hear your voice as well, because in addition to being a trigger for emotion, and memory, when you can not only listen but record audio, it takes all of that heritage legacy material and it repurposes it. If you think of all the time that we spend collecting memories, and you know better than I do, all of the tech that's used, all of the hours and the research, and then you actually have an archive, and then you want people to interact with it. And sometimes that interaction will be having an elderly person record what it was like to be in the civil rights movement, or an aunt to record what it was like to pierce the women's liberation barrier. But then you might also want to hear how that affects the children or the next generation, how they might look at a picture and say, that person looks eerily like me, or ask a question and hand it over. I mean, oral histories are something that's been around for a while. My dad did one of his mother, my grandmother, but audio is coming back. People are doing voice texts. People are writing voice or audio journals. It's a lot easier. It's it's the most, I would go, organic and seamless way of communicating. The first thing a baby sense they have is to hear, and then to speak. And so it's very visceral. And what's exciting to me after launching this product is seeing how people in the memory making space are using it. I knew that from Build-A-Bear. So many people come in with that last recording on a tape machine, and they want to preserve it posterity, and they want to put it on 5 teddy bears.
Mm-hmm.
The beautiful thing about our device is basically you enter a number and you record a message, you enter a number and you play back that message. And because it has, 10 numbers, it can hold 999 messages split between 10 hours. So virtually there's no limit to its capacity. We love the fact that it doesn't have a screen. You don't need a subscription. You don't have to put QR codes all over the place. Basically, what we've developed is a kind of a work ethic where you take a little sticker. We love these repositionable, removable stickers that won't harm where they're on. You take a pencil, you write on the back of a photo, or in the margin, you put the sticker on, and then you invite people to record. Around holidays, it's amazing. But it just means that all of the archival work that we do can live on. It can live on, it can be part of a conversation. So there's a built-in microphone, which makes it so, you impulsively, you can add that voice. But there's also a USB cable, and that's for charging it, but also for backing it up, because trust me, you are going to capture some amazing archival audio. But also, if you could imagine going to one of these wonderful publishers and making 5 or 10 books about a wedding, about a trip, about the family history, and then passing a play around and having everybody record their impressions, their memories, then you plug it into your PC and you copy it onto 9 other devices. So it becomes something that's easily to duplicate, easily to save. Some people actually use it just to capture the audio because it's so easy and easy to do. So it's I love the device, but more so I love the way people are talking to us about it and thinking of new ways to use it.
It sounds like it can be both a way of recording sort of firsthand memories, as well as offering somebody else an audio tour of your research. So it has that dual functionality, like you said, that it sounds like it has a very, it's a very diverse tool that way.
I just did a workshop, and what I suggested for people who are using it is don't start with the number 1. Start with 5, then go to 10, 15, skip. Because ultimately what will happen is after you do that, as you say, the introduction to the book, say, I was privileged to gather this material. Then people can go ahead and add page 6 and 7 and 8. They can add an introduction, an acknowledgement, all in audio. And if you think of the power of voice, this also opens up our content for the young, before they can read, and for the elderly who have problems reading. The power of audio is, I think, growing and growing as people understand what it can do. You can record the music of an era and put it, or the music that was danced to at a wedding, and that changes the whole experience of looking at a wedding album. I love the fact of what it does in terms of the product and the things that it delivers, but I also love the process of gathering around that shoebox. If you can imagine a shoebox with 80 images in it, and you're picking them out around the Thanksgiving table, and all of a sudden somebody grabs it and starts talking, all you got to do is put a little notation on it, and then you throw the play back in the shoebox, and guess what? You have a time capsule, an audio time capsule of everything that's in there. It's really exciting.
The product is the Play Universal Voice Recorder. The company is VoiceGift, and we're so glad you joined us here today, Jeffrey, and we'll see you at Roots Tech.
Yes, our website is www.voice.gift. There's no .com after that. It's just voice.gift. We're looking forward to being at Roots Tech. We're going to actually have a contest, so keep your eyes open for it, of people that come up with ideas as to how to use the play in memory making and collecting. And we're going to hand out a whole bunch of plays at the show. Really look forward to seeing you all there and getting to know the industry one person at a time.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
And now, back to our interview with David Fryxell. So that's Boolean terms, and we touched a little bit on the different search forms. The general search form at a site, the empty search bar at the top of your browser versus something a little more targeted, say immigration search page. Can you tell us about wildcard characters, which probably work not necessarily at all three of those, but at a lot of them?
Yeah, fortunate wildcard is pretty common, and sometimes they're a little bit different in exactly how they work. The two mostly being an asterisk and a question mark. And depending on the site, usually an asterisk might stand for one or more characters. So, John asterisk would get you Johnson, for example. And a question mark usually is just one character. You never know with the sites, they might mess with that, but that's a general rule. It's really useful because of the weird way that, names work, particularly with genealogy. So, I have Dickinson's, for example. Well, you'd think that that'd be a common, easy one, but I get Dickerson, I get Dixon, there are all these variations. It could be ON, it could be EN. So if you use wildcards, you can get around a lot of those problems. Now, a number of sites are sort of good at, they figure this out for you, and sort of imagine that you might really mean Dixon as well as Dickerson. But I kind of like to be in control of that and, specify more closely what I'm looking for, because you never know, they might leave, some out too.
Right. And the nice thing about both Boolean terms and wildcard characters is that you can use them often in combination with each other. So it's not that you have to only do one of those at a time. You can kind of use them. In the article, you provided a few examples of where you're using quotation marks to indicate, I want this exact phrase, but I recognize that, somebody might be mentioned with their first name first or their last name first. So you would want the search engine to pick up George Phillips or Phillips, George.
Right. Yeah. That's an oddity of records. I mean, we're used to a lot of records, particularly modern ones, going with the surname first. And so it'd be easy to just miss those if you're looking for an exact match. And you should just never underestimate the ability of transcriptions to be weird and off. I mean, I often think about, I have Rousseau's in that Dickinson family, spelled like like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And one guy just eluded me completely until I found it as Rousseau, Russaw. I mean, no amount of wildcards, admittedly, is going to get that one. So,
Well, yeah, and there are multiple levels of, or multiple places where that kind of disconnect can happen. There's the surname may have been spelled differently by the person. The person creating the record maybe misheard or changed the spelling. Um, the family may have anglicized the name or changed it over time. Then there's, as you pointed out, the transcription. So, what looked at this? Was it a person creating an index manually? Was it an optical character recognition software at some point in the past where the accuracy may have been kind of spotty, or did the website apply its own technology? So at any of those points, there could be a disconnect between what you're searching for and how it's going to show up in the database.
well, and one of the tricks that I think I talk about in the article that would turn up like the missing Rusaw is try searching without a last name. If you're dumped, it may be that there's a transcription or other issue. So if you put in enough other stuff, a birth year, first name, relatives, even places, anything that you can do, I would always suggest do the bare minimum. Like if you enter a few things, then you get 100,000 hits. You probably need more info in there. But if you try doing it without the last name, because that I think was the only way I found John Rusaw, because as they say, no amount of wild cards or anything else would ever have found that very distant spelling.
Yeah, the ability at genealogy websites specifically to add relationships, birth dates, as opposed to if you're on Google, you're crawling so much data that is it the year, just a year that happened to be mentioned alongside that name? Is it the year the thing was published? There are so many variables at a big search engine versus, at ancestry.com, where if you're on the immigration search form, hey, what year did they arrive? And it looks for that. The caveat to that, though, is if you are looking for a particular record that doesn't happen to mention that information, it'll be excluded, unless you're careful about how you draw that parameter.
Well, that's why the little exact boxes that you can
Mm-hmm.
check, those can really trip you up. As you mentioned, like if you're looking for a record and you look for put in the death date because you know the death date,
Right.
and so you check the exact. Well, any records that occurred before the person died are going to be left out because that data is not going to be in there unless he had foreknowledge of his death, I guess.
Right.
So I always say use those exact boxes with great care.
That touches upon another question I had, which was, what's a common mistake that genealogists make when searching?
Well, the exact one is a good, and they're all kind of related. I think the most common is providing too much information at the start because you may miss things that because of those transcription errors or all those sort of oddities. So it's better to enter a little bit and get 10,000 hits, and then you can narrow it down from there, than to be so precise that you actually get 0 hits or 2 and they're wrong.
Right.
So
And then you think that it's not there. I can't find
yeah,
it. There's no
yeah,
record.
I always,
Right.
it's my ancestor's missing in the census. Well, probably
Right.
not. But the way you're looking for him, because maybe his first name is not listed in the census. Maybe it's just initials or something. But if you say, and it absolutely has to be Joel, exact, then it's not going to show up. So a little knowledge is the danger. A lot of knowledge is a dangerous thing in this case.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that the strategy is so important. So if you're looking for an immigration record, what's the arrival date? What's the birth date? Death date, not going to be very relevant. So you shouldn't
Right.
search on that if you even have the ability to, depending on
Unless they made it onshore in a casket. In that case,
Right.
Probably not.
Right. Exactly. Now, another big thing that has changed, not just in search, not just in genealogy, but in technology generally since 2016, is the evolution of AI, and that's a buzzword everywhere. This JanDev issue also had an article on AI, for example. What's a role that you've seen AI playing in online searches?
Well, certainly we see AI beginning to create content, in effect, or index content, like what MyHeritage is doing with their old news site. That
Mhm.
there's a lot of, suddenly I'm getting all these emails from MyHeritage that says, we found these things in old news. And I've actually gotten a fair amount of good stuff from
Mhm.
that. You mentioned the family search uh, using AI. The Archive Digital, the Swedish site I use a lot with my Swedes, is doing the same kind of thing of making documents available. And of course, then on the search, I mean, I confess, like when I use Google and it has the little AI thing shows up at
Mhm.
the top, I tend to look at that first and maybe only, which I'm not sure that's actually a good idea on my part because there may be other things, down below. And I mean, the related thing is I just saw a thing the other day that the AI and that sort of search is really hurting a lot of websites
Mhm.
because I'm just seeing the stuff at the top and
Right.
I'm not actually clicking on the sites listed down below, which is killing their traffic. So
Mhm.
that may long term have an effect on genealogy websites that if you're just sort of scooping the key information out, at some point those sites, if they're ad supported, they're not gonna make it.
Right. And the Google summary is a good example of when a lot of people are thinking about AI now, they're not thinking about the algorithm that has been operating search engines forever, or uh,
Hmm.
a record match system out of a genealogy website. They're thinking about ChatGTP or a Google summary, and that's a different tool than here's some information, an information retrieval, like a database retrieval query. It's generating something new
Right.
from
It's not just
analyzing.
here's a website where you can maybe find that
Hmm.
information about your ancestor. I mean, here's a silly example. The other night, there's an ad for, I think, Progressive Insurance, where the father is trying to explain the facts of life to the kid, and then there's a substitute, and the actor who plays the father looked familiar, and so I Googled, of course, to see who is the actor, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And the answer that came back is a different actor who also is in commercials, who is a much older, different race actor who plays Dr. Rick. And
Hmm.
looking at this, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Well, so now I worry what other answers that I'm getting, maybe from my genealogy, are equally ridiculous, but because I don't know the answer, I don't know it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
So I mean, when I did the article, I tried a little bit of AI searching, at the end, and most of the results were not very terribly useful.
Hmm.
And one, in fact, referred to something completely different and sent me a link, gave me a link to a video that was a completely different person, not my ancestor at all. So now I'm like in the grain of salt, universe here of be careful.
Right. And I thought it was interesting you made a point to say an ancestry got that person on the first page. Like it was
Yeah.
not close competition. Um, that's another thing I think sometimes people expect a chatbot to be able to do is, hey, tell me about this specific ancestor. It'll give you an answer, but whether that answer is based in any kind of fact is a separate issue.
Yeah, yeah. And it's useful for, like, I've been in a series of meetings about some AV equipment, and we've used their phone, and I think they use Otter to
Mhm.
transcribe the entire thing. At one point, however, I gather Otter decided that two of the participants in the meeting were having an argument and were fighting. That didn't happen. But on the other hand, the fact that it could transcribe the entire thing was pretty amazing.
Mhm.
But still, the little landmines there.
Sure. And so this last question I have for you is a little bit of a thinker. And some of our listeners will have been researching their ancestors for a long time before online records were widespread. And keyword searching, as we've been talking about it today, is kind of a different skill from what you were doing 30 years ago, even longer ago, in terms of going to a library and manually going through a catalog or scrolling through microfilm. Can you talk a little bit about what that skill set is like for the modern genealogist versus maybe how people started doing genealogy decades ago?
Well, it really is different. You're right. The whole strategy of what should I search for? How can I get the most results, but not too many results? How can I avoid losing, good results? It's an entirely different sort of mindset from, when I would go to the Family History Center there in Cincinnati
Mm-hmm.
and scroll through microfilm of my Swedish ancestors. And there, the skills mostly were, stick-to-itiveness,
Mm-hmm.
having your eyes not go bad on you,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out how to spot things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the one similarity is when you're looking at microfilm and doing some sort of those things, sometimes there are things that you can use as clues. So, for example, in the Swedish records, they almost all give the person's birth date. Well, so I learned to just scroll and look for that birth date in this mound of, very difficult to read handwriting. In a way that's similar to what is the one thing I can use in an ancestry search to find the person. Well, what facts do I know that can really narrow this down? Well, the birth date, if you're really sure about it, as you would be. So in a sense, some of the skills are the same or are transferable,
Mm-hmm.
but there's certainly a lot less scrolling and eye strain.
Right. And a lot more time to research since there's a lot less duplicated effort or barking up the wrong tree,
Right.
maybe.
And of course, also, there's as we say, the danger of finding information about your ancestors that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Bogus family trees and all that sort of stuff. I guess because it's so easy to get to, suddenly you could plug in your ancestor's name and have all this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so the challenge now becomes sorting through it, figuring
Right.
out what do you really want to add, what's really your ancestor. Whereas before, it's like, oh my gosh, I found my ancestor in one book. Great. I found one census record this week. Okay, great. Whereas, well, when we found out something about my wife's family, it was on a Sunday afternoon a couple years ago, and thanks to a couple of online sites, I mean, I had the family back to England in the early 1800s, like in that afternoon. And that experience you just would not have in the olden days of scrolling microfilm.
Right. An embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot more about source analysis and looking at citations and primary and secondary sources rather than just finding the thing in the first place.
Yeah. And, is this, you have more of the question of, is this the right ancestor, the right person? Whereas before you're just thrilled to find something,
Right.
Let's
Exactly.
hope it's the right person because it took an afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, David, for coming back to the podcast to talk about search. And the article again is called Star Search. It's in the January-February 2026 issue, and I'll link to that in this episode's show notes. Thanks so much, David, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining me in this month's episode of the Family Tree Magazine podcast. You can find the show notes from this episode and all episodes at familytreemagazine.com/podcast. While on our website, you can also sign up for our free email newsletter where you'll receive free genealogy resources each weekday, including links to new podcast episodes as they're released. Until next time, have fun climbing your family tree.